Talk to me nice.
G'day Art Snackers, my name is James of James Lee Burke Creative and welcome to another month of ArtSnacks Box Freestyle, where we take the supplies from the March 2022 box, experiment with them to within an inch of their lives, and then hopefully create a masterpiece for the hashtag ArtSnacks Challenge. Today's fun fact is, although I don't mind strawberries, and strawberry flavored lollies are my favorite kind of lollies, I hate other strawberry flavored things, specifically dairy and strawberry mixed together. Like strawberry milk is probably one of the most vile things on the planet to me. But I do love strawberry lollies, and strawberries are okay, the real ones. Anyway, let's get on to our box and see what we've got to play with today. Alrighty, here is the March 2022 ArtSnacks Plus box. Here's everything inside. Let's unwrap that little green burrito, take a closer look at what we'll be playing with today. First up in the Plus box, we have the Strathmore 400 Series Black Mixed Media paper pad in size 9 by 12. There are 15 sheets of heavyweight black paper to use. We have the Marabou Mixed Media art crayons, a set of 4. I have the lovely red set. And in the Plus box, we also have a Montana Shock white acrylic marker, 0.7mm extra fine tip. Today we'll also be playing with the Pentel Arts Dual Metallic Brush Pen. The color I'll be using is orange and metallic yellow, as well as the Sakura Jelly Roll Moonlight Pen size 06, and I have a light grey color. We'll also be using 2 Corinne Pigment Deco brush markers, and those colors are Pale Violet and Cool Aqua, as well as a Uni-ball Signo Gel Impact Pen. That's a broad 1mm rollerball tip in the color gold. We have our snack and sticker. I always get that wrong. Snack and sticker. Let's set everything up and get to playing. Okay, you know the deal with Box Freestyle. First up, we have our experimentation phase where we get all of our supplies prepped and primed, ready to use, and we play with them, and then we create something super fun for the hashtag ArtSnacks Challenge towards the end of the video. So let's start with the experimentation. There are a few things to note about priming some of these pens. The dual brush pen, you just want to click the button on the back just to make sure that that ink is flowing nicely into the well and then through the bristles of that brush pen. The Corinne markers are actually ready to go, but you do want to give them a really, really good shake. In fact, all of those markers with the liquid ink, the paint ink, you want to give them a really, really good shake because the pigment does settle over time. So you can usually hear the little ball bearing in there. Just shake them super, super aggressively, and then you can get the best use out of them. I generally store mine lying down or sometimes with the tip facing down, but most of the time just lying down flat. Rarely. No, I'm not even going to lie to you. I do actually store some of them standing upright. It's not going to kill your marker, but it will be harder to get that pigment to mix again because usually the ball bearing then settles in with all the pigment at the bottom of the pen. So it's not the end of the world. I guess I do store them any which way, but just in case you were wondering why sometimes it's a little harder to prep and prime them if they've just been stored upright. The Montana acrylic paint marker, you might have seen that clip where I just showed you just pressing it into the paper. That's just a pumping action that will get the ink to flow into the nib. I used to be really aggressive with that and kind of bash them into the page because I never thought they were working properly. I've since learned that you just want to put the tip to the paper and just gently press into the paper and pump that nib for maybe 15-20 times before the ink will actually start flowing. Just resist the urge to bash it against the desk because you will break the nib. So patience is a virtue there. It was not something I used to do. I've broken many a paint marker trying to prep them and prime them the wrong way. But once they get going, they're actually all really great. This is a really nice black paper to work in. I think this is the first time I've used black paper in Box Freestyle. We've had some toned papers before, but black is completely different to the toned paper because it is essentially the darkest thing you're going to put on the page, so you're working light on top of everything. I tried to mix a little bit of a paint there with the white paint marker and some of the crayon and mix it together. It was quite transparent and maybe not the look I wanted for a skin tone, so I opted out of that in the end. But it is good to try all of these things. What I actually thought was most interesting about this experimentation was when I did the wet page and I put all of the markers and supplies through that puddle of water. They had a really beautiful bleed on this paper. A lot of the illustration papers or papers that aren't specifically formulated to take a lot of wet media don't tend to bleed a lot when you use this wet application, but sometimes I really like an ink bleed because there's just a lot of practical effects that you can do in your illustration with that. So I thought this paper was actually probably one of the most impressive papers I've used for that ink bleeding technique. which we've used before. So that's just something, it's always something good to note about the new substrates and the new supplies that you're using. I wanted to go with a bit of a fashion angle because I do love a bit of fashion illustration. I'll talk more about that when we get to our ArtSnacks challenge piece at the end. But I was trying my best to put all of the supplies together, and I guess, you know, mixing them together wasn't really working out for me. A lot of them were just kind of creating muddy, like, mixtures, and it just didn't seem as, I guess it just didn't seem as nice as some of the supplies I've mixed together in the past. But it's not a bad thing. It's not always a given that all of the supplies that you get are going to give you the most variety in the entire world, but that's why we do these challenges, just to see which supplies are more useful. Say if you're packing a really small kit but you want to do a lot of mixed media stuff while you're traveling, some of these supplies are friends with everybody and some just don't really get along with anybody. They're loners. They don't mix well with others, and that's what this is all about, finding out which ones of those do that for you. And it's not to say that some of your favorite supplies can't be ones that are just best used alone. It's just good for us to know that, so that we can make those decisions better, especially for someone like me who takes art supplies pretty much everywhere. I like to build a kit that has a lot of versatility, but there are some supplies that I just love using so much, and I know they don't work well with others. I'll still take them anyway, just because they're my favorites. Alrighty, before we move on to the ArtSnacks challenge at the end of this video, I wanted to talk about some of the supplies in the box and what I really enjoyed about them, because some of these are my favorites, like the Uni-ball Signo gel pen that I was just using. I love those. The white one is a part of my staple, you know, take everywhere with me art supplies. I use them all the time. The metallic gold and the metallic silver, like all of the metallics, are just super beautiful. Everything is very opaque, which is really hard to get out of a gel pen, and you know, it's really being put to the test on black because it is not really a darker color than that, right? So, or the absence of color, I should say. You know, it's hard to get things to show up and be super opaque on that. So I was very impressed with those, and specifically the 1mm wide, the broad, I think it's called, the 1mm nib. Very, very effective to help that ink flow through, especially since it's so packed full of pigment, to be able to be so opaque. The Pentel dual brush pen I absolutely love, but I don't think I have ever not liked something with glitter in it, so I'm a bad judge for that. I will absolutely adore anything that has glitter in it, so that one just got me. I was really impressed with the Montana acrylic paint marker as well. It's a very, very fine tip, and also, you know, the opacity was very impressive, especially considering it was white. I think if anyone out there has tried to search for white gel pens and white paint pens before, you know the struggle with opacity, but that one worked really, really well. The Corinne pigment deco brush markers, I really enjoy those. I think they're absolutely fantastic for small illustrations that, you know, you want to kind of have that painterly look, things that you might do with gouache, but if you just don't have the skill to do it with gouache, I would absolutely pick up a small set of those markers. And the Marabou crayons were really nice. Only a few of them showed up really effectively on the black, but they were super creamy, super buttery, and blended out well with water. Now comes the time where we take everything we've learned and we put it together and create something for the ArtSnacks challenge. I think I used every single supply in this one, and I'm going to jump the gun here and just let you know that I'm absolutely obsessed with how it turned out. This is probably one of my favorite pieces I've done for Box Freestyle, and it's more because it's so related to something that's just so deeply rooted in my passions about creativity and illustration. So we're gonna get there. I'm gonna explain it all. But fashion illustration, yes. You would never know this to look at me, but I love fashion. I've loved to read fashion magazines for years and years and years, ever since I was a young teen, and I would draw everything I could from a fashion magazine, and I would just be going to the library and checking out books of fashion design. I learned how to draw figures that way. I learned a very stylized figure that way. Learned that it was nothing like an actual human figure. I figured that out a few years later, but I've always just really loved it. It's so fantastical. And I guess when I'm talking about fashion, I'm thinking avant-garde, haute couture, you know, high fashion, kind of your Chanel's, your Dior's, your Givenchy's, Prada, like all of that. I've just been obsessed with it for the longest time. Fun fact, I did want to go into fashion design when I was, I think 16 is when I became a little bit more passionate about it. And it was always in my plan. I actually applied to fashion school, I got accepted, and I said, well, you know what, I've got an opportunity to go dance. And I remember saying this to the guy that accepted me. I said, look, I'm going to take this opportunity to go dance, because that was also my dream, right? I had too many dreams. I wanted to go dance, and I said I would save up my money so that when I come back and I do the fashion design course, I can use silk for my final collection instead of having to buy polyesters. So, I said I was going to go save and I would come back. Ultimately, I ended up dancing for years and years and years, and I never went back to fashion design. I lost my competitive edge for it. If you've ever read a fashion magazine or, dived in or just put your toes into the fashion world, it's a super cutthroat industry. And you do need to be, I guess, on the go. I mean, you're doing fashion collections like 2 a year or multiple a year, and it's go, go, go nonstop. I did a work placement at a fashion design studio. I learned how to sew from my gran. I learned how to illustrate fashion through a short course. It was like one of the only short courses I had done at that point. And even through family friends, they had helped encourage me as well. So it was a big, big part of my teenagehood. I actually thought that was going to be my career, and that was going to be where I went. Now, this is kind of nothing like how I used to draw fashion design. This is a bit of a hybrid of all of the stuff I've, enjoyed about art journaling, and, my illustration style has changed a lot since then, but I've become so much more confident about just letting go and having fun with the mixed media that I actually find fashion illustration even more enjoyable now, because I love to play with all the art supply mediums. I love to use all the textures and all the supplies and all the different papers, and, back in the day I used to just use Copic markers and a fine liner, and it all had to be really, really neat. Sometimes I'd use a pencil to add some shading, and I just felt like it felt like it was really real. Like I was spending a lot of time trying to create a really real replica of a fashion illustration. But now I have this approach where I get to draw all of these fantastical designs that, I really couldn't see anyone wearing down the street, but they pop up in my head, and I just think this is perfect for me. I can just do it any which way. It doesn't even have to look like it's going to be something. No one's going to make this. I'm not challenging myself to make it. It's just going to exist as an illustration, and it can be a part of that fashion fantasy that I love. So this is what I decided to do for today. I think we used absolutely everything. The crayon didn't get as much use as it did in the experimentation. You saw I was doing some feathered, fringy moments with the crayons. I decided that these, I guess, porcelain cowgirls didn't need any of those feathers, but looking back on it, I probably could have given them a big old fabulous feather boa or something. I just love it. I love fashion illustrations so much. I love fashion magazines. I love the fantasy of it. I love that it doesn't have to make any sense, and it can be as wild and outrageous as you want it to be, and that it's just wearable art. It's just an extension of someone's creativity, how they decide to style themselves and present themselves to the world. So this is my fashion illustration for the ArtSnacks challenge this month. I hope you enjoyed watching. I'll join you for an outro in a second. There we go. That's it for March 2022 ArtSnacks Box Freestyle. I hope you enjoyed that. If you would like to join ArtSnacks, you can use the code JAMES10 for 10% off at checkout. And don't forget to tag us in your work using the hashtag ArtSnacks Challenge on social media and in the Mix community. Until next month, bye.